I'd like to welcome you for this conference on scaling up from tree and stand level research to sustainable silviculture at forest and landscape level. And my name is JP, or Jens Peter Skovsgaard. I'm the coordinator of Division 1 in IUFRO. Division 1 is the division dealing with silviculture. And the other people in Division 1, or at the coordinatorship of Division 1, is Khosro Sagheb Talebi from Iran, Pilson Park from Korea, and Goveen Aurora from India. And Goveen is new on the team. The other two have been here many years. Goveen is our new communication office holder, I think it's called. And then finally, we have Teresa Fonseca, who is behind the technical legalities of this 3-day conference here. So this is the first time we are focusing formally at silviculture at landscape level. So in the beginning, when we announced the conference, we thought that we were unsure how many presenters we could get in that topic, but it turned out that almost all presenters are dealing with silviculture at landscape level, some more at the stand level as usual, but this means that silviculture at landscape level suddenly became the overarching topic of the conference here. This is very good. We would like to launch a new unit, working unit in IUFRO, focusing on silviculture at landscape level. So if you would like to be involved in that, you're welcome to contact me or any of the other Division 1 people, so we can set it up. Then I'll tell you a few words about the mode of operation. After we'll have 3 presentations, and then we'll have a break, and then 2 presentations. And when we get back after the break will be 10 minutes exactly. When we get back after the break, Teresa would like to take a couple of photographs of all of the group. So there you should please have your camera turned on for that occasion. And then for the presenters and also for the participants, the mode of operation is so that each presenter has 15 minutes. And after 12 minutes, the moderator will interrupt and tell that there's 3 minutes left. And our moderator today is Pelle Madsen, my old colleague Pelle Madsen from Denmark. He's a tough guy, so take care. Teresa demonstrated just before that she can turn off the microphone and close your presentation and anything. So please be on time. We want this very strict time schedule in order to allow for discussion and questions after each presentation. And this means that we have maybe around 5 or 7 minutes to talk about each presentation. All right, I think that was about it. And if there's something I've forgotten, I'll get back to you at the end of the day, where I'll round off this session also. So for now, I'll hand over to Pelle, and good luck with your presentations and with the discussions.
Thank you very much, JP. I want to make a correction. I'm not a tough guy. I'm soft as a pillow. But I'm Pelle Madsen, and I'm happy that I was invited to be the moderator of this session today. I think we should move on to the first presentation, which will be by Mohammed Negahdarsaber. I'm sorry for my weak pronunciation of your name, Mohammed. But you will be talking about aquifer management and plantations in desert areas, in Gareh Baygan desert in Fars in Iran. You have 15 minutes from now. I'll notify you after 12 minutes. So please, I'm looking forward to see your presentation.
Thank you very much. At first, I have a question. How can I find my uploaded PowerPoint? I should do it again?
But don't you have it on your computer so you can share screen like you did before?
All right.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. You are on now. It's perfect.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you to pay attention my presentation. It's about a 14 years project that carried on in Gareh Baygan in Fars province of Iran. And it's one of the most greatest achievements of our institute in the desert land. Really, Gareh Baygan Desert is a state in Fars province. It's the map of Iran, Fars province, and the desert of Gareh Baygan that the project carried out in the area. The main problem of the area was there was nothing fresh water enough for living, for farming, for livestock husbandry, and the other activities that the people need to live. So many people try to immigrate from the plain to the large cities like Fasa and Shiraz and the other area. Making dam for gathering water was very difficult and very expensive. So the Institute of Research in Rangeland and Forests in Iran, by our professor, Said Ahan Kosab, who has this project, tried to make a cheap and useful project in the area to making fresh water for people and staying people there. The mechanism is very simple. If you had a river, I don't know how it works, the movie. We need a river that it happened, flood water in the river during the year, maybe one or more time. By make a dam, the flood water sent to the plain that it designed by some strips and channels and let the water to calm down in the area and make full the sources of water in the soil and the depth of the land. The first time is a flooding water, full of mud, full of soil parts and silt, clay, and the other part of soils. It's one of our technician, Mr. Peritunian, that he stay in the division dam that send the water to the strips or basin in the Gareh Baygan desert. And it's the first time, really first pictures of the area in 1985, something around 14 years ago. And the first water flooding that catched by the water catchment system and separating water in the area. In this program, one of the greatest activities attracted people, especially native people in the area. Look at the students in the 14 years ago that are now, they are all the man in the area, and the other people that they try to planting eucalyptus, especially Eucalyptus camaldulensis in the strips as a main trees in there. Why Eucalyptus camaldulensis? One of our colleagues, Dr. Mortazavi, have an experimental design in the area, and he find Eucalyptus camaldulensis as a adapted tree in the area, and also Acacia salicina as another tree that it was adapted in the area. Both of them were very adapted for hard condition, low water, and not good quality soil for growing. But what's our achievements in the Gareh Baygan desert? At first, do you remember? You should remember the first picture of the first year that I show you And the next picture shows the first water catchment in the area. And this is the same area. This is that area after 40 years. Look at the forest land, look at the rangeland. It is one of our most achievements in the Gareh Baygan desert. And improving 3 stands, eucalyptus and acacia in the area, and the flood water that's separating around the area and have a time to going down in the soil. And the other achievement was attract the people from the native people, from the communities toward make a cooperative system for improving their goals for better life, especially women's. And they help us to making a goal as a really trainer for their children, for their families, to understanding what is better life for the native people in the Gareh Baygan. Now we have a wooded pasture for grazing livestock. We have grass harvesting, especially in the strips, and livestock grazing for 700 livestock per year in the area. That it is something around 2,500 hectares. It's the area of our project. And the other organic honey production. Every hive have 11 kilogram honey produced during the year. And the other achievement is the utilization of wood and the leaves of eucalyptus for rural use and for medicine purposes. That it's completely make some job in the area. Many people that haven't job, they find their job, they find their goal in the life, and you can find them completely different from 14 years, last 14 years until now. The other goal that we find in the area was training students. Students in faculties, Tehran faculties, students that by the Tema professor, their professor, and a student in a school, that they come around the water catchment area and find, based on the training, what is the water catchment, what is water, what is soil, how can we make a landscape for our rest time, for our picnic, and the other goals that we try to find them in this project. The other activity was cultivating cereals by floating water, not irrigated, not built, not just floating water, that it's happened in the area. And beautiful landscape in the roads. You think during the trips, passing a road like this, you may want to start to rest in the area by this landscape. And clean and fresh water, that it's completely available. Now after 14 years, many people finding that the aquifer management can change completely their hopeless life, and they find how they can improve their life by this system. Many people that was immigrant, now they are stay in the area, and they can find how they should try to do this better and more better. Some questions in the second announcement present to us that some of them, what are the consequences of tree stand level decisions of hydrology at a scale of watershed on entire landscape. If you look at in this project completely, this project completely show how we can do it by the cycle of hydrology, especially by using aquifer management. And the other question, how how do we best secure the long-term procurement of sustainability product, forest product, while maintaining our biodiversity and ecosystem services? That in this project completely show how we can provide this system services by plantation, honey production, wood production, and the other secondary production of forest completely help to people to sustainable life and development in the area. Of course, monitoring and repairs needed in the system. Dr. Kahari and Arjumandi, one of technicians, they are trying to show this, their activity. And finally, I should appreciate Professor Said Ahankosa, who built the aquifer management in Fars, who start to do this.
3 minutes left.
Yes, it's finished. And really, I'm proud to work with him. Thank you very much. And I am ready to your question.
Oh, thank you very much. That was indeed good planning. And I will now welcome questions for this excellent presentation, and surely it followed the theme of the session of the landscape approach. So, are there any questions for Mohatma Reza? I see nothing in the.
Yes, Jens Peter have question.
Yeah, I have a question, yes. Maybe I forgot to mention for people that you can use this raise hand function if you have questions, and then you come up in front of the screen of the host. Anyway, so I have this very small question. It's 40 years ago you said that this started, and of course the view on tree species and so on was different at that time. But why did you choose eucalypt as one of the main species? Were there no native species you could use, or is it just because you knew that eucalypt would be very efficient for the purpose?
Sorry, Jens, your voice was going down, up, down, up. If you
okay, I'll repeat. My question is why you used the eucalypt as a main species instead of a native species.
Yes, it's really a big question mark for eucalyptus in the area, of course. But in the 14 years ago, it was designed by, as I said, Dr. Mortazavi, one of our retired colleagues there, and it was one of the best species as using low water and keeping the soil as a very good protection. If you look at the first strip in the aquifer management, you have many part of soil that they are going down in the soil and completely close the spaces between the soils. If we haven't a powerful root system in the area, we was not able to say today that we are it is our achievement that we are victorious in this project. All right, and the root system of eucalyptus completely make very good hole in the soil and let more water go down in the soils. Maybe many people say eucalyptus using more water. Yes, but you can never find any landscape, any scenery like this in the desert just by eucalyptus. Our trees, the native trees, are very small and they can't show themselves. But you have now a really good forest, especially during the spring that many people of Iran taking trips around the desert and better than under the shadow of tree. Yes,
All right.
eucalyptus is completely help us to show our achievement in the area.
Thank you.
Okay, and I see that Marion, you have a raised hand.
Yeah, thank you. I was also wondering about the eucalypt, but I see that this looks like a real big tree compared to much of the native plants. Could be a kind of safeguard. In the break, I can tell you a story about it. The other question is when you have this kind of project, there's often problem with groundwater quality and access to groundwater and salinity. Are you monitoring, or was there early monitoring of water quality? Or
Yes,
is it not an issue?
No, of course. At first, the level of the water in the bills in the area completely coming up around something around 15 meters during 20 years ago. But something happened using more of water, especially new farmers that they are start to farming in the area. Were better than the area that have water. But for the monitoring of the quality of water, some of my colleagues, Dr. Parkpavar and Dr. Rusta, tried to do this, and they are completely monitoring the quality of water, of course, the salinity and the nitrate, because of using more step by step going up for the better quality. Dr. Rusta, one of our colleagues, make refiners for salinity and nitrate in the area that it is used, and completely proved it's effective for this purpose.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we need to move on now, but thank you so much for your presentation, Dr. Negahdarsaber.
Thank you very much. I am Mohammad Negahdarsaber. I am in social world as Siamak Saber in Facebook and LinkedIn. You can find me, and if you want more questions, I am there. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. And now we can actually have Margarida Tomé and your presentation on eucalypt forests and landscapes in the Iberian Peninsula. You were put on first in the program, but you had a busy program today with teaching, so we rearranged a little bit. So Margarida, please, you have 15 minutes from now. Thank you.
So I was asked to talk a little bit about eucalyptine forests and landscape in the Iberian Peninsula, and I tried to prepare some slides for that, but after going through them, I thought that the message was not very clear. So in the beginning, I'm going to give you some messages, and then I hope that in my presentation, you will be able to see why I'm mentioning these messages, okay? So the first message is that forest management has costs. It's not free. And then another message that is very important, at least in Portugal, is that forests and land in general, they have owners and they are the main responsible for forest management decisions. Another message is that the perception of the importance of ecosystem services is different depending on if you are living in urban areas or if you are a landowner or living in rural areas. The ecosystem services can be classified as private and public. The private are the ones that are usually the goods that have a price, have some rules to be used, and when we consume them, others do not have as much to consume, and the public ones are the ones that are used by everyone and not so directly related to the place where they are provided. But some people forget that. Some people, when we talk about ecosystem services, just think about the public ones and don't think that the goods are also very important. So another message is that all ecosystem services are important, and that each stand or each species provides some ecosystem services, but there is a difference between the share of the type of services that are provided. And those are the message I will try to pass with my presentation. First, talking a bit about eucalypt expansion in the Iberian Peninsula or in Europe. It was planted the first time in the 18th century, but by the 19th century it had been introduced in several European countries for ornamental purposes. And Eucalyptus globulus has been found to be a very important species, become more expanded, but especially in Spain and Portugal. And this is due to its fast growth and wood properties. And at present, we have 0.84 million hectares in Portugal and 0.64 million hectares in Spain. They are very important species there, with harvests of 6 underbark million of cubic meters in Portugal and 7.6 in Spain. But the consumption in Portugal is even higher because the industry capacity is so high that we have to import part of the wood that we consume. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about the expansion in Portugal, because this relates a lot with other issues. So forests are very important in Portugal. 36% of the area is forest, and we also have a large share, 31% of shrub and grassland. And very, very important, most of our land is privately owned or owned by communities. Public forests are very, very, very few, not very many. And we don't have many species. So basically, we have eucalypt, that nowadays, according to our last inventory, would be the most important species in terms of area, cork oak, maritime pine, holm oak, and then all the other species just represent 18%. So it's not a very diverse forest. And we have had a big area planted since the 60s. Okay? We are characterized by a lot of fires, and one of the problems that is usually associated with the eucalypt is the fires. Especially urban people think that the eucalypts is the species that are most prone to burn, even if it's not true, because if we plot the total of burned area in comparison with the area of eucalypt and maritime pine that were burned, the share is not that large. Just for you to have an idea, in the beginning of the 20th century, the area of eucalypt was 0 in Portugal, and nowadays it's one of the most important species. Okay? So what are the challenges of these plantations? Why are we talking today about eucalypt? From an economic point of view, either at country level or for the landowners, it's a very relevant species. It's very, very important for our country. But being an exotic tree species, there is some concern about its potential environmental impacts. And very important too, both in Portugal and Spain, there are several examples of poorly managed stands. And to bring some light to this issue of opportunities and challenges of eucalypt plantations, a large set of researchers from Portugal and Spain, we tried to discuss all the problems around eucalypt plantations. And I think that's because of this work that I was invited to talk here. But I read again the paper, and I think it's a nice paper, but it's very difficult to summarize because we just sampled all the issues that are related with eucalypt. So here I tried to bring also some of the most important challenges and try to discuss them. So they have some possible negative impacts on the environment. They are usually assumed to are more vulnerable to hazards, namely to fire and to pests and diseases and climate change. And the poor management is also one of the challenges. But some of these challenges are generic and they affect all the plantation forestry, at least in Portugal, and I suppose that also in Spain. But what about ecosystem services? I summarized here the type of ecosystem services that we can have. I suppose everyone knows that. And the provisioning ecosystem services is what I called first the private ones, and then we have the public ones. And the problem is that there are trade-offs in ecosystem services if we think, especially if we think at stand level. So if we put the provisioning or private ecosystem service on the y-axis and all the others in the x-axis, then we have dendrobiomass production. We have here our eucalypts and combined objective forest. I put an example, the cork oak, close to nature, and nature conservation. And what is very important, the poorly managed forests, they are not good for provisioning ecosystem services or for the regulation cultural and support ecosystem services. But what is real important is that the income for the landowner comes from the type of forests that have a large share of provisioning ecosystem services and very few from the nature conservation. On the contrary, the value for the urban society is the contrary. They value the nature conservation and they do not value the forests that provide money to the landowners. In a questionnaire that was made by EFI in 2016, we could find out that most of the people did not value the rural development, the income for the landowners. They just valued the carbon sequestration, the habitat for species, and all the services that are provided by forests managed as nature conservation or close to nature forestry. So how to achieve a balance? And here are some ideas. I think that we can achieve the balance by analyzing our management each stand as being part of a larger region, the landscape, basing management decisions on their impact on the landscape, and combining in the same landscape diversified stands and other uses, agroforestry, agriculture, fire breaks, riparian zones, that will bring the required biodiversity and improve resilience to risks. And legislation on land use must also be defined and applied at landscape level. I'm showing here a landscape. This is a property owned by one of the companies. Then suppose that all stands are planted with eucalypt. This would be horrible. And ecosystem services for the landscape would be similar to those that I showed first. But now let's look at the reality. We have some eucalypt and we have a lot of cork oak stands that are very biodiverse, and the picture is quite different. The situation is completely different. So some recommendations that came from the analysis of the opportunities and challenges of eucalypt plantations for us to think about. They are very important because they support the pulp and paper industry that is very important for the country and provide income to small non-industrial owners. But they still keep, we can still keep environmental impacts at an acceptable level. How? First, it's very important to define the potential productivity of the species in each region and to select those where the productivity is high to make the plantations. Then we should...
Left, Margarida. Yeah.
Okay, I'm almost finishing. We should think about make a conversion of plantations that are located outside the areas of high productivity to other species, and also in the areas of high productivity to take care of the poorly managed plantations and bring them to their potential. In this way, we can provide the amount of demand that is looked for by the industry, we can provide income for the landowners, and we can keep the environmental impacts to a good level. And very, very important, management at landscape level will guarantee a good share of ecosystem services that will be very beneficial for the society. And also, as I think that certification is also important, because it's a way to force people to have good management. Certification sometimes is difficult for very small landowners, which exist very often in Portugal and northern Spain. So promoting group certification was also one of the recommendations in our paper. So this is always a recommendation from us that work in science. So we should increase the knowledge on the functioning of eucalypt ecosystems, because the better we know the system, the better we will be able to manage it. And we have a problem with the health of the eucalypt plantations, so we should have a cooperative program between Portugal and Spain in order to take care of the problem. So now I'm ready for questions.
Very well, thank you very much, Margarida. And we'll be looking for questions showing up on the chat. I see already one from Peter Spathelf. Please go ahead,
Yes,
Peter.
thank you. Thank you, JP. So my question, Margarida, is a typical question on eucalypt plantations. Do you have figures on the water consumption of this kind of species? So is it so negative as it is reported frequently? And what is the situation?
We have some figures. And we have some figures in the publication that I commented.
Okay.
But what happened, it depends a lot on the type of water basin where it is planted. But anyhow, of course, they consume water, but the amount of water consumed per cubic meter of wood produced is smaller than for other species. The problem is that as they grow fast, they produce a lot. Okay, so they in fact consume water, but they do not consume more water than the other species. And the type of management we do is also quite important, because several years ago we were not taking care of the riparian areas like we are nowadays. So we have to do a good management. And the main message in our paper was that with the good management we will be able to use the species in a way that will be convenient for the society.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, sounds like problems is something you solve. I like that approach. JP, you are the next.
You. Yeah, well, you didn't emphasize invasiveness very much, or the spread of eucalypt in the landscape, maybe. What about is there a social concern about that, or is it
about the invasiveness?
Yeah, I don't know whether it's considered invasive, but a lot of exotic species are, and small seed species and so on. But it's well, anyway, it's a last question, I know, but
JP, some people can think it's an invasive species, but there's many studies published about that. And we did a good survey in the paper, but the problem is that it's very easy to fight. It's not like acacia, for instance. Once acacia is invaded, then you cannot do anything. With eucalypt, is not the case. If we do a good management, there's no problem. Of course, that the species, after so many years of living in the country, is naturalized. It naturally regenerates, for instance, of course. But the maritime pine is much more invasive, that is native, much more invasive than the eucalypt. And the eucalypt, if it regenerates too much, then if you harrow, they will die.
But often the argument is not just the invasiveness, but the fact that it's not native.
Because the fact that it's not native. Yeah, some people, especially people living in urban areas, they don't like the eucalypt. But I'm from rural areas, and in rural areas, we love eucalypts, because that's the only species that gives income to the landowners. So that's the problem, you see. And nowadays we have an industry that is very important for the country. So I think that what we need to do is to do a good management, to take care of the landscape, as we are doing nowadays, And I usually say that the problem is not technical, it's socioeconomic, because the fact that we have so many small landowners that do not do a good management can bring some problems. If we are working hard, and I think that we are being successful in making group management to have large areas with good management and with a good mosaic landscape, then I think it won't be a problem, but that's my opinion.
Okay, thank you. And now we learned, in addition to the first question, that there are small problems and there are big problems. And we also learned that people living in the rural areas want income just like people living in the urban areas. So yes, thank you very much. And Nuno, you have been patient, but there's only limited time. So a quick question and a quick answer, please.
Thanks. It's a very short question on the regulatory possibilities. You mentioned, of course, the difficulties now how to organize the country and its players to change the forest. And you mentioned one regulatory tool will be group certification, which is an initiative by the market and by the market players. And the other is legislation by the government. Do you think today we have too much legislation and too little certification, or the opposite? And which one do you believe it's more profitable, more effective in changing the landscape?
I think that the problem is not to have having too much legislation, is having too many plans and anything being applied in practice. That's my main message. So the legislation sometimes is provided without being based on scientific results. They are just ideas from people, and they are converted into several regional plans. But then the plans say very nice things, but then when it comes to implement them with all these small landowners that sometimes don't even know where is their land, it becomes very difficult. So we should develop plans to be applied in practice. I think that's the break, not to apply things in practice. And according to the group certification, I think it's fine. It will help.
Thank you very much, Margarida. Very good responses, less theory and more good action on the ground is your message here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And we will have to move on quickly to the next presenter, Khosro Sagheb Talebi from Iran, who will tell us about inventories of the Oriental beech in the Caspian Forest. Looking very much to see your presentation, Khosro. Then I think we should see Veronica Loewe's presentation on stone pine silviculture in Chile now until the break. And then we take Khosro's after the break.
So I will share some of the advancements on silviculture of stone pine in Chile. And as you well know, this is a very interesting Mediterranean species for many reasons, but also economically because it bears this very high valued and demanded pine nuts. Well, the species has a very long reproductive cycles that take 3.5 years. So in the same tree, you have 1, 2, and 3-year-old cones growing at the same time, which poses challenges to the management, especially nutritional and water management. The cones worldwide are harvested mostly from non-managed forests or limited managed plantations in the species native range. And it can be cropped successfully from a financial point of view under different management schemes. And the one feature that is very relevant nowadays is that it is a drought-resistant key species that may be used to replace others less adapted to the challenging climatic conditions driven by climate change. So pine nuts are the most expensive nut in the world, with prices that arrive up to 80 euros per kilogram at the wholesale, so very expensive, with an unsatisfied and growing demand driven by the greater purchasing power of populations in several countries and the worldwide consumption of natural and healthy foods. And it is used as a gastronomic tradition in countries as Italy, Spain, and others, and also as a luxury item similar to caviar or lobster in many wealthy populations around the globe. Pine nuts are one of the 9 most traded dry fruits in the world. And so it has a commercial importance. Besides pine nuts, also cones, in-shell pine nuts, and the residues of the elaboration can be marketed. And so we are facing a sustainable cascade use of natural resource, reducing the dependency on fossil fuels, which is one of the bioeconomy definitions by itself. In Chile, stone pine was introduced over 2 centuries ago and planted by European immigrants, of course, and planted as isolated trees, as groups or small stands, mostly for cattle shadowing, and also in high density plantations for soil erosion control and the dune stabilization. And it is mostly concentrated in a latitudinal range of around 1,000 kilometers from the beginning of the very dry area where the Atacama Desert starts up to the south in the lake and river region, which is more temperate, and from the coast of the Pacific Ocean up to the Andes mountain range, even above 2,000 meters above sea level. Excuse me. Most plantations are medium intensity managed plantations. And there are also some cases of agroforestry in which agricultural products and animals are included in the plantation for the first 8 to 10 years, which is very important for small owners because the trees don't bear fruits in this initial period. So it's an income source very important for them. From 2014 on, several landowners and investors have been looking at the species and planting, establishing over 3,500 hectares up to now. So you see here new plantations of 4 or 5 years with different growth rates, of course, depending on the locations and also on the management practices applied. There are some few cases of high intensity managed plantations with a permanent irrigation, I mean, during the growing season, and the fertilization too. And a few grafted orchards, which are very important to increase cone production, to reduce the unproductive period at the starting of the plantation, to homogenize the product, and to make to facilitate management and harvesting processes. So nowadays it is considered an emerging crop in the country with several advantages. One of them is it is harvested in winter when there is labor and machinery availability. It would be exported in the opposite season, and the in-shell pine nuts can be stocked for several years, which is important in this first year in which the productive chain is under development. So we have done several studies looking for the advancements of the domestication of the species. First of all, we did a very wide study of around 5,000 trees, and found that the species has good growth and fruiting, even without management along the country. And we define macro zones for stone pine in Chile, in which we define based on the growth and cone production, north macro zone, a dry coast, but this is the Pacific Ocean, and a southern area in which the species performs better. We found also high adaptability of European provenances in central Chile, and studied the species variability through the pine nut, the seed variability through different approaches, some traditional as the morphometric and chemical characterization, but also we use innovative techniques such as proteomics and near-infrared spectroscopy, and found differences in the different macro zones that I already showed. We also compare the chemical composition with pine nuts harvested in other countries, for a total of six countries in several continents, and recently made a characterization of pine nuts harvested from southern hemisphere countries such as Chile, Argentina, New Zealand, and Australia. In all of them, we found that the quality of pine nuts, even though there are some variations in the protein content or some of the components, are all of very high quality and healthy, with a healthy. We have touched a little bit some productive models of the agroforestry one I showed you before, and the potentiality of areas either in Chile or also in neighboring countries such as Argentina, with interesting results because there is a huge area available. So regarding cone production, we have studied masting. We have a series of around 12 years and found that there is also the presence of masting here, less marked than in the species native range, and quite related to the climatic variability. We have studied a little bit on hormone applications, growth and regulators to advance the induction of flowering. And we are studying some grafted orchards to compare with the management and to compare with the traditional plantations from seedlings. And of course, we are monitoring the biotic challenges, and especially Leptoglossus occidentalis that arrived into Chile 4 years ago. So we are following this also through the pine nut yield monitoring. Well, we also have studied and are studying, this spacing issue. The density is quite relevant, either in young plantations or mature plantations. We found an earlier cone production than compared to Europe. And fertilization and irrigation are two very important techniques that we are trying to study and deep. Both are interesting. Fertilization, quite important.
3 minutes.
Even though Okay,
Veronica.
we have many challenges ahead as, you know, to develop the nutritional standards for the species that are missing anywhere. So pine nut yield, as I said, is also one issue of monitoring for economic reasons, as also for sanitary and pest and diseases issues. So we are looking to optimize the pine nut production through an intensive stone pine cropping system that considers elements from the design of the plantation, mechanization, selected material for the reasons already given, eventually the use of pollinators in areas in which we don't have mature trees, and management since the establishment considering fertilization, irrigation, weed control, pruning and productive formation and productive thinnings, and the intensification through root pruning, and also by adjusting the management following the climatic growth and production information that we have on the areas. And all of this, why? Because of the many externalities of this species, both at the cultural level, the beauty of the landscape and recreation, the environmental benefits, including carbon sequestration and soil protection, and then the possibility to develop this productive cluster that will build sustainable or help in building sustainable production and livelihoods. So just to conclude, we are in front of a crop that creates economic growth along social and environmental benefits that is feasible for small and medium landowners and small and medium enterprises, and that can help face important challenges, including the adaptation of the productive systems, food productive systems, to climate change, which is an issue nowadays. So thank you very much, and I'm here to answer any question.
Sure. Thank you very much, Veronica. This was a very interesting introduction into one aspect of sustainable intensification. And I would like to hear now if there are any questions from the audience. I can see, Peter, you have your hand up, but I think it's from the last session, from the last presentation, but maybe you still have the first question here.
No, I don't. It's the last hand. Thank you.
No? Any questions? I would like to ask you, Veronica, then how is the economy for the landowners in a production system based on the Pinnier compared to fruit orchards, farming systems, some of the other important parts of the rural economy?
Well, you know, we are targeting, well, people are getting interest by their own, but the main target are all of the stakeholders that have been marginalized from the forest activity in the country, because it's the traditional industrial model with huge plantations of radiata pine and eucalyptus that actually, especially radiata pine in a small scale, is not profitable, you know? So for them, most of them are, well, it depends. There are very small ones with very small activity, just the production of some products for their own consumption, and some others that have, you know, productions of blueberries or, you know, fruit production that are interested, because it is an opportunity to use soils that are not very good and to diversify their production, and to have a fruit that is not so demanding as others, for example, as cherry, that is very labor intensive. So there is a wide variety, and we found interest from several of those cases.
That's very interesting. You're basically saying that forestry in small scale is difficult to make profitable because of the very large industrial scale plantations in the area, and then you can utilize the poorest soils for crops based on the pines here.
Yeah, we also, for example, one of the landowners that we know had previously radiata pine, 200 hectares, actually. It wasn't little one. 200 hectares, and he cut and he said, I lost money. It was a horrible investment. And he planted now stone pine. He's very interested. Plantations are young, so they are not still producing. So we cannot compare, you know, the actual income, but the figures are good. I mean,
sure.
We have received people from Spain, Portugal, Italy, trying to buy homes and seeds. So demand there is.
Sounds good. And Teresa, you have a question, please?
Yes, Veronica, I appreciate very much your presentation. And we have also some projects with this species. And one of the images that you show makes me some confusion because you have some dense stands. And I believe, but I would like to have your opinion about the influence of density on the production of fruit. Could you please talk about that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, yeah. Well, density is an issue because traditional high density plantations have produced like 40-meter tall trees here. So it grows. It grows looking for the light, no? So we are working between 5x5, 7x7, 6x6, and looking at this intensification, and especially from the fruit producers, they like these very dense plantations. We have to wait and see. For the moment, for example, these young plantations, 10-year-old plantations, you have in 5x5, you have less fruits than in 7x7, but then you have more trees. So at the end, the production per hectare is the same. So we will have to follow that on time and see what is more convenient, because through thinning you for sure can control this, but it's an issue.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think we have to move on to the break now. Because we are run. What?
I'll take over the break, and I'd just like to encourage people you can contact each other either during the chat here or via email to continue discussion, because there are many of these items that we'll be talking about that we cannot finish the discussion today, or we have to limit it because of the meeting format. But the break is on for exactly 10 minutes, and I have a stopwatch, so we'll be back in 10 minutes, and then stretch your legs and get ready for the final go. See you later.
And Khosro's presentation, is that?
Khosro's presentation is in my hands now, and so we'll make a joint presentation where I'm just pushing the button.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. So because of the technical problems here, we will postpone the photography until after Khosro's presentation. And so my only job now is to hand over to Pelle to continue the moderation.
Okay, that's an easy job now, because I just want to ask Khosro to start on his presentation. 15 minutes from now. Please go ahead, Khosro.
Okay. Hi again, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. And also, it's a great pleasure to present some of the results of our researches here. This is the preliminary results of Oriental beech old-growth forests in the Caspian area. You see the landscape and the Elburz Mountains, the Caspian Forests, located on the southern part of the Caspian Sea, and they are mostly summer green broadleaf forest of West Eurasia and very similar to European broadleaf forests. As I already mentioned, these forests are located just on the northern aspects of the Elburz Mountains in the southern part of the Caspian Sea and stretch from sea level up to 2,800 meters above sea level, covering a total area of almost 2 million hectares, which is 15% of total Iranian forests. We have a project assessment and monitoring of the Caspian Forest, and we have laid more than 36 sample plots all over from west to east and from lower parts to the higher parts. You can see some of them in these yellow stars in different forest types, from oak forests, beech forests, hornbeam forests, very pure and mixed forests. But now I am focusing and just going to present some of the results of our studies in the beech forests and in the old growth beech forest actually. As you see in this slide, Fagus orientalis or Oriental beech is a dominant species from almost 1,000 meters to 2,000 meters above sea level, making pure and also mixed stands in this area. Some just short slides from different aspects of these forests and our sampling plots. So after laying out these sample plots, what we have measured and the preliminary result that I'm going to present here from the old growth forest, one aspect or one criteria is large and old trees. We have measured individuals with more than 200 centimeters of diameter at breast heights, which are almost 400 years old. One other criteria in the old growth forest is species composition. As I already mentioned before, we have pure stands with more than 90% beech to mixed stands of beech with different species like velvet maple, Caucasian alder, common hornbeam, large leaf lime, elm, and many other species. And some of the pictures down, you can see some of these species. The other criteria in the old growth forest is deadwood. This is a very important element in the old growth forest and plays very important part in the biodiversity and also for the regeneration. We have measured at least 7 and maximum 27 deadwoods in 1 hectare. In the mean, we can say that it is about 16 deadwoods per hectare, and the volume varies here between 7 to 197 cubic meter, and the mean is about 56 cubic meter per hectare. Structural diversity and complexity is another issue in the old growth forests. In all these different kinds of mixed and pure stands, we have 1 to 3 vertical strata. It depends also on the development stages. When from initial stages you are going to the decade stages, you face with different stratas from 1 to 3 layers. The other aspect is also diversity in structure is the tree number and volume distribution. As you see in these 2 slides, we have the distribution of number and volume over the diameter at breast height. In some cases we have, and the distribution form you see is something like uneven age stands, is a J form, starting from 70 small trees with 10 diameters in hectare up to 1 or 2, sometimes more, in more than 100 centimeter diameter. And the volume also is distributed unevenly in different parts, mainly on large diameters or large dimensions. The other issue is the spatial pattern. And you see in the left side that these all different species, how they are scattered in the area. And also in the right part, you see the heterogeneity in density. This is very, very different from even age stands that we have managed them in our silvicultural aim. Gaps are also another issue here. By falling of 1 to 3 trees, which produces areas of less than 100 square meter to more than 500 square meter in the gaps. In some exceptional cases, we have also seen large gaps with over 1,000 square meter by falling of 6 trees. It depends on the slope. It depends on the age of the trees, but usually we have 1 to 3 falling deadwoods. So after these gaps are created, it happens that we have the regeneration usually in small to medium-sized groups. It means about 200 to 500 square meter. And the mean number of the seedlings in each gap is something about 11 per square meter. Here you have some of the figures in the table, which I have already explained you by the previous slides. Recently, the ecologists pay more attention to microhabitat trees or tree-related microhabitats besides the deadwoods. Here you see all different kinds of these microhabitats, from the nest of the birds, from barks, from buttresses, from old strips and crashes, and also some other parts that they can provide a very good habitat for other animal species or insects or fauna, I would say. Diverse pictures from all these microhabitats where owls have their nests here, or other birds, or also some tumor-like cankers and also some parts you see in the lower parts by the buttresses. One of our recent researches, which was published in the Journal of Applied Ecology, showed that almost more than 20% of these microhabitats are provided in root buttress cavities. More than 20% by lians, and something about 5% by splintered stems and dendrothelms, which are bowl-like holes in the stem that the water and precipitation can stay there and provide a good habitat for amphibians as well. And in almost 20% of cases, we have more than 2 of these groups of microhabitats in one tree. Also, the old growth forests are very interesting from the aspect or from the point of biodiversity. Different mammals, different birds, different insects. We have found a lot of subproxilic beetles on the deadwoods here. I will show you some results later. Also, you see these slides here from different reptiles, amphibians, bottles, beetles, and fungi all over on the standing and laying deadwoods. Also, some indicator species that you can find in old growth species or in unmanaged stands that is very comparable to the managed stands. It is the also subproxilic flies. We have found 5 endemic subproxilic flies, which you only see in the old growth forest, not in the managed. Also 24 subproxilic beetles. From them, 12 are endemic species, and we found also 6 new species for the world. One aspect that we maybe rarely...
3 more minutes, Khosro.
Okay, I'm just finished. One aspect that we rarely pay attention in silviculture, but recently we look a lot about, is the aesthetic point of view. In old growth forests, you may find very, very interesting illusions and pictures from trees. Maybe the picture you see in the middle, the tree that like a Z form, maybe in the managed forest, for the first cutting, you will cut this and eliminate it from the stand. But this could be a very good aspect for ecotourism, will be a very good aspect for biodiversity, and we can keep also some of them in our managed uneven-aged forests. Some other aspects and illusions that you can see here with 2 shapes. I don't know what you say they look like. Somebody said these are some wooden monsters or something like this. But I would also like that we can take account these aesthetic aspects in our management goals and to be more natural and to be more, come closer to the nature and to learn more from the old growth aspects using in our management and the silvicultural tendings in the forests. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Khosro. Taking us into a tour of quantifying quality or quantifying aesthetics. That's great. Thank you very much. And now I'm looking into the to look for raised hands. Are there any comments, questions for Khosro regarding these amazing forests in the northern part of Iran? Yes, JP, you were first, please.
Thank you. I have around 2,000 questions, but I'll stick to just one comment, I think, and that is the fact that you point out in the beginning the issue of aesthetics, but aesthetics in forestry often lies very, very close to the ethical aspect, in my opinion. So I think this is really often an underrated thing. Even when we talk about plantation forestry and so on, it should be an integral part of our thinking, I would say.
Yeah, thank you.
Other comments, questions? Teresa?
Yes, I appreciate very much, Khosro, your presentation. And when you refer to ecotourism, I agree with you, because there are a lot of people that prefer and have the idea of go to the forest just to have a good time. And sometimes we as a foresters, we do not think about that, but it is a good subject to think more about that. And silviculture for tourism also.
Yes, actually from the recreational point of the view, the tired people from the cities, when they are just living in beton and metal and gray areas, when they go to these green areas, they really look like to see something else. All these illusions and such pictures, they can make a great value that you cannot quantify this. You never can say, I have enjoyed being in this forest for 1,000 euros. But you can say, this wood or this tree has 1,000 euro value. But how you enjoy to say, you never can express this in euros or in money.
Sure, the pleasures of a good walk in the forest is hard to value by money, but
yeah.
Fortunately there are other ways to count it too. Okay, Khosro, thanks a lot for providing us with an insight in real natural forest with a 2 million years history on the place, extremely relevant for especially European perspective. But we have to move on to the last presenter, and that will be no less than JP himself. And you want to talk about you.
Thank you. I will certainly. I'll see if I can share the screen now. Here we go. And,
yeah, good.
Now we are there.
Now we're there. So going back to what I'm going to talk about, yew. So what I'll do is I'll propose a long-term field experiment on yew silviculture. So nothing about scientific results or anything like that. And the problem with yew, or the challenge with yew, is that yew has been overexploited in Europe due to mainly warfare. Use of yew for weapons was the main reason. Moreover, we are facing what has been called a regeneration failure, at least in some places. And maybe there are also issues of climate change. And now Taxus baccata, or yew as we just call it, is actually a rare species across all of its native range. So you could say that survival is due mainly to an extreme shade tolerance of this species. At the same time, yew has a very valuable timber. It's actually one of the highest paid timbers in Europe when it's available in the market. And then it has this poisonous substance also called Taxol, or substances derived from Taxol that are used in cancer treatments. And you cannot produce these types of medicine synthetically. You need certain components of yew. So that's another reason for taking an interest in it. And then there are spiritual values and a number of other reasons. We know almost, I wouldn't say everything, but we know a lot about yew DNA. So we have a very thorough knowledge of the genetics. And we know a lot about garden varieties, even of Taxus baccata. And then as an aside, we have this Japanese yew, Taxus cuspidata, which is grown very much in Europe, in churchyards, in cities, in gardens, and so on. And this is actually presenting a threat locally to the European yew because of pollen pollution, especially near towns, of course. When we take all this together, we actually know very little about what we could call forestry phenotypes. We have very little knowledge of yew genetics from a forestry perspective, from a stem form perspective, and so on. And we also lack the knowledge of regeneration and tending. Maybe we have lost it over time, or maybe it was never really there. And out of this, I have deducted that we need an experiment on new silviculture. I actually already made that conclusion 40 years ago, and now before I retire in long distant time from now, I want to make this a reality. So here's the experiment. This is just a proposal, of course, a draft. This is the experimental design. So we'll plant yew with oak, we'll plant yew with beech. We'll also plant yew with beech and larch. And we'll do this so that the larch can provide an economic revenue, an early economic revenue. And then, of course, we'll also plant some plots with pure yew. So we'll only focus on here in this proposed experiment, we'll only focus on the planted situation, because what we already have out there, we can of course improve the silviculture, we can improve our knowledge and so on, but we cannot, you could say, we cannot promote the species on a larger scale or except if we plant it. So for this purpose, I need multiple seed sources because the idea is to include a number of different genetic types. Yew will be planted here at 2 densities. You can see this in the slide here, where we have the up here where we have the group planting of 3 by 3 yews in this matrix of oak in this case here, and then we have individual yew trees planted just in the oak stand here, and then down the beech is down here, and the larch is the yellow one, and the red over here is of course the yew. All right, and in the end, this experiment is planned to be replicated at 3 or even more locations, depending on how many seeds we can get, and also depending on how many of these germinates, so that we can plant them later. So what is going on now is that I'm trying to collect seeds. So there's a provision of seeds in 2021 right now, this autumn. And the idea is that these can then germinate in 2023 and get ready for planting maybe in 2026 or at least in 2027. In this map here, you see some of the areas that we have already harvested. As you see here in Sweden, where I work myself, we have done 4 harvests so far, 1 in Norway, 1 in Switzerland, 1 in Spain, 2 in Poland, and I think 1 is coming up in Italy also. And I heard just before the conference started here that maybe a harvest also in Croatia. So, and sorry, 1 in Georgia even. So we are already well on the way. But the idea is to simply just cover the area where yew is native with some to get a representative representation. Sorry, to get a good representation across the native range of yew. That's the idea. So I would say if any of you can contribute or have any ideas here, then it's really the time is now. And what do we do? Well, we go out in the forest, we select some examples of yew trees that have a straight stem, or at least stems that don't have repeated forking or early branching out. So when a stem is forking repeatedly, then this is often out of genetic reasons or genetic origin. So we collect the seeds or the berries or whatever you would call them. We rinse the seeds and then they're ready for pre-treatment. And I will say also, in addition to these straight stem yews, it's still interesting to get use of interesting genetics, such as, for example, from Spain or from other areas, so that we can cover the area. There are some special new results about the genetic separation or the genetic differentiation of yew in Europe, indicating that Spain or the Iberian Peninsula is something quite special. I won't go into details with that. So what is needed is 3,500 seeds for every seed source. And that's approximately 300 grams of rinsed seeds. And as a minimum, I need 1,300 seeds per seed source. That's in order to make at least some 3 small replications. This can be done if we cannot get 3,500 seeds. 3,500 seeds may sound like a lot, but it's actually not. It's what you can collect in a few hours. So often the transportation to the use stand is the time-consuming factor. And then I would say, as usual, rounding off here or in conclusion or whatever you would call it, what we always do when we have research projects, not send more money in this case, of course I like the money also, but send more seeds. And then you ask, what's in it for me? Well, for you or for me maybe, I cannot tell you. You'll have to wait 200 years. It's certainly nothing that will boost my career, but I hope that it will boost some young person's career in a long distant time from now. This is a very important species for the future, even though it's a rare species. We have a lot of these minor tree species that we could do much more about in silviculture, and this is just one such initiative. So I invite you to contact me if you can contribute or if you have any good ideas. Thank you very much for listening.
JP, I simply love it. Denying that time is a limiting factor. That's the core of forestry, isn't it? And silviculture research. So that was very inspiring, and I think also very optimistic, and I would say also very relevant. It's yeah, I'm really happy to see your presentation here or experience your presentation. Any comments for JP, please? I think people have left to go out and collect seeds already.
That's right. Simply.
Oh, Khosro, please. Yes.
Oh, okay, just one question for your last slide here. The tree you are leaning into, where did you take the picture here?
Oh, yeah, sometimes I visit England, and in England they have this tradition of having one yew at every churchyard. So when you drive around the landscape, there are these magnificent, huge, and very old trees. So, and I couldn't resist this one here, but there are many of these. And of course, they are maybe not the target for this project here. It's just a nice photo. And also it shows the spiritual, or you could say the cultural context of the species. Here in England, it's with the churches, but there's a cultural context in many other parts of Europe with you. So,
and how old do you guess this is?
There's a lot of guessing about that, and not only this tree, but in the literature you'll see, and some of these are wild and others are not, maybe. But I have no idea. I even forgot what the diameter was, but of course I measured it. So.
Yeah. Our yews actually have a 1 millimeter diameter increment growth.
Yeah.
Per year.
But, yeah, it can be more. It can be more, but it's just debated with these old trees, and there's also this discussion. I mean, it may grow or it may live, but it may have very little growth at breast height where we measure it. So maybe diameter or circumference of an old tree is not really so interesting. And there's been a lot of coring of these old trees also, especially in Britain, but also elsewhere in Europe. And often they are rotten in they're hollow in the center, so you can't really get there. And the growth rate can vary substantially. You may have a period where it's growing very fast, and other periods where it's growing very slow. So, from a scientific point of view, I think you can guess anything you want. But I guess the good guess in England, or when you have this in a cultural context, is often that it's older than the current structure. So my guess would be that it's older than the church. Maybe it was there already.
I would say that too. It is older than the church behind you.
All right. Lisa, did you have a question or a comment too?
It was just to inform that I am almost sure that the Portuguese Forest Service will help you on this.
Yeah, as you can say, I strike out the money, but of course I don't have any money for this project here. But you don't get money if you don't start it, I think. So that's where we start. As usual, without money, but good ideas.
That's the way to go, optimistic as always. Yes. Okay. Right. I think if we are going to make it to conclude before 5 o'clock, and we are going to have a photo session as well, we are in a bit of a hurry now. So I will thank you for giving me the opportunity to moderate. It was a very interesting session. And JP, I'll give the word back to you, please.
Thank you, and I'll hand over to the photographer immediately. And so the only thing I can say is please turn on your camera and look as nice as you can, or at least the way you want to look. And then Teresa will take a number of photographs. We need more photographs because we are spread on different screens, of course.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you too.
My final task today is to thank all of the participants for being with us, for contributing to the discussion also. I hope you'll continue the discussion afterwards. We decided that this format was a good option, that we have these short sessions on a number of consecutive days and in different time zones. Of course, it's not as long a conference as usual, and it's a different format, a different discussion, but it is at least a way to meet during these times here. And it's very efficient in many ways. We get some inspiration and we save on carbon costs, you could say. So tomorrow we are having one more session at another time, which you can see in the time schedule overview. And I hope to see some of you there tomorrow also, and I hope to see some new faces also. So thank you very much for being with us. Have a nice day, have a nice morning, have a nice evening, whatever you're heading for.
Okay. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.